C, April 6th. This is day 18 of the lockdown here in Syracuse, New York. Everyone in our community, everyone at the Center for Better Bones is doing well. And I hope you're all doing well. Kind of time to take that deep breath. We have a brilliant sunny day here, and I hope you do. The first sunny day you get outside. Let's get some of that vitamin D. Let's get some of that fresh air and exercise our lungs for sure. Today, I want to talk a bit about bones, and I want to talk a bit more about boosting immunity. And I'm going to kind of also tie those into this concept of heroes, those great leading edge thinkers who proposed thoughts that took a long time to be accepted, and many times to the detriment of the community and to the detriment of our health. I'm particularly thinking about how slowly orthodox medicine changes. There is some interesting news. Let's start out with my colleague in Canada, Dr. Geraldine Pryor, who's one of these heroes. And she is a hero of medicine who has looked carefully at the data around menopause, around hormones, and has really looked carefully at progesterone. Dr. Geraldine Pryor is actually a foremost researcher on progesterone, written many, many articles and books. And she really has well documented the fact that progesterone is extremely important to bone health, while much of the attention over the years has been given to estrogen. And in fact, one of her real interesting findings to me was that about 25% of young women, both in Canada and the US, these are premenopausal women, have actually a luteal phase defect. In other words, they have low progesterone and they're not having a proper menstrual cycle. And this luteal phase defect, that may look like they're menstruating okay, but they're not, and this leads to a lower bone density. I'm sure one of these days we're going to be able to measure young women's progesterone levels through their cycle and see who's deficient in that second half of the cycle when progesterone is supposed to come up. We want to cultivate adequate progesterone. It's a very important to bone. And what she has shown also strikingly is that stress can cause people to have menstrual disorders and luteal phase defect, which leads to a lack of bone density. So again, the stress situation comes in. In their experiments, when women paid attention to their bodies, noticed the signals the body was giving off in regards to menstruation, had some community support, about half of the cases of irregular menstruation, luteal phase defect corrected. Dr. Pryor's work is available on the internet. It's Dr. Geraldine Pryor. You can look it up. We'll try to give you a link to that. Extremely important work, and she was a hero who's consistently stayed on task of helping the world see the value of progesterone for building bone. Today we're going to talk also a little bit more about the vitamin C heroes. You know, we have many books. In fact, I had 3 big notebooks stacked up here, and they just all fell on the floor off our little table, documenting the value of vitamin C as an antiviral and as an immune enhancer. I began studying vitamin C 30 years ago to help with my own health problems and those health problems of my clients. I was well versed in the antiviral capacities of vitamin C and the immune boosting capacities long before we had this new influenza. And I've been studying the various heroes, clinicians, researchers who used vitamin C, who documented the value of vitamin C, and yet whose work has been very low recognized. So today I want to just show you a couple of these pictures. And why did I get in this vitamin C hero kick? Well, partly because I was just ready over the weekend to say, look, enough about COVID, enough about vitamin C. Let's talk about building bone. Let's talk about alkalizing. Let's talk about exercise. Let's support one another in these ways. I was just about ready to say, look, I've had enough. You probably have had enough too. And then I came across this really fascinating article about, it was titled like this: Could vitamin C be the cure for deadly infections? Now this happened to come to me on the Audible, my Audible subscription, Smithsonian Institute has these little articles that they give for free, and for some reason that article came to my mailbox when I went to Audible. And it was a 2017 article by Jim Morrison. I'm going to give you the link to this article. And in 2017 article, a 2017 article where he was reporting on a doctor, and this is our latest vitamin C hero, a doctor who is called Paul Market, M-A-R-I-K. He was Eastern Virginia Medical School, a pulmonary care specialist. He began using vitamin C for sepsis. Sepsis, some reports say, is the #1 cause of death in U.S. hospitals. It's where you have an infection and the body gets an extreme response to that, almost an autoimmune response, and the body attacks itself, and people die very quickly. He started, because it's such a deadly situation, he started using high-dose intravenous C, and he got remarkable results. And because this was done 2017, in recent years, they actually called some attention to it. They began looking into it, and it's very interesting. You see with vitamin C that you have to have appropriate dose. It has to be high dose, which some of the other heroes we're going to talk about today said decades ago. And you have to move quickly when there is any sign of infection before the infection gets too strong. That's why with our clients we're suggesting just stay on a daily base of maybe 3, 4, 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C. And then when you find you're getting a cold or you get ill, take more of it. So this Merckett, a very, very interesting study. I'm going to give you a couple links. It was published in the Smithsonian, and then NPR, National Public Radio, picked up in 2019. They did a story, again by Richard Harris, saying that is it possible that this could be a very great cure for sepsis, which is such a serious disease. So Dr. Paul Market goes on our list of heroes of vitamin C. People who persisted even though there were naysayers. And there's been some clinical trials that look favorable with vitamin C and sepsis. The problem is, of course, Market explains, some of the studies, they came in too low dose and too late in the disease, but still they showed a great deal of promise. The other vitamin C heroes, of course, let me see if I can find it. Let's see if we can have a little recognition test. The vitamin C heroes are people like this guy. Now, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is Albert St. George. He is a Hungarian researcher who actually was able to isolate vitamin C, and he isolated it from his garden, the paprika. And as you know, everyone knew there was a compound that prevented scurvy, but no one could identify it. This fellow identified it, and after that, they were able to synthesize vitamin C. And some doctors got the brilliant idea, after they saw how it worked, how it enhanced immunity, how the white blood cells literally gobbled it up when they had an infection challenge. They started doing just clinical work. And this guy is Frederick Klenner. Now, Klenner was in the 40s. He was in the U.S. He was in North Carolina, and he started using vitamin C for polio, another viral infection. He used high-dose intravenous vitamin C. He's written many articles. You can look up his work. I've linked to his work before. And he actually found very excellent results with polio. And then he went on to look at many other infectious diseases and many other viruses, actually. Then Robert Cathcart took on the work of Klenner and others. Cathcart is another physician who began using vitamin C, but he tended to use a lot of oral vitamin C, and he had people taking very high doses of vitamin C. I've written before it in my blog called 9,000 Cases of Healing with Vitamin C. Cathcart is the one who discovered, he was very surprised to discover that under stressful conditions, there is always a great increase in the utilization of vitamin C. Now, this was very early. This was several decades ago that he discovered this, when he started using vitamin C himself and using it for his clients. He became a great advocate and saw many thousands of cases, 20,000 cases, and he kept very good records of these, so it's really interesting. He occasionally would use intravenous C, but he mostly used oral vitamin C. And and with very good results. If you want to look up the work of Robert Cathcart, go to my blog on alkalinforlife.com, about 9,000 cases of healing with vitamin C. This fellow, you probably can't see this, but this is Irving Stone. He got very impressed with all the work of these physicians. He started studying it. He was a scientist, and he really helped us understand that most other animals produce vitamin C, and they produce a lot of it when they're under stress. And so he wrote a very practical guide to vitamin C. I can't remember exactly the name of it. It's a little white book. It's you'll find it, Irving Stone's book, The Basic Guide to Vitamin C. And he helped people understand that most animals produce a lot of it. And he, again, pulled on this documentation of physicians who'd used high dose in humans who can't produce vitamin C. We have no chance of producing it when we're under stress, and started following that theory. Well, let's do like an animal would. Let's use lots of it. And again, Irving Stone did a great deal to educate the public. And one of the people he educated was this guy. Can you see this guy? This is Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling won 2 Nobel Prizes. He became very impressed with the work of vitamin C. I've spoken about him before. Even though he was a Nobel Prize laureate, people criticized him. Other physicians criticized him for getting on the vitamin C bandwagon. However, he wrote many articles and many books. They researched vitamin C for not only common colds and influenza, but also cancer. And now his work on cancer is being vindicated by research funded by our government at the University of Iowa using intravenous vitamin C in high doses for prostate cancer. This other fellow, you maybe can't see this. I had a hard time finding a picture of him. This is Emanuel Sharaskin. Now, Sharaskin is a physician I've heard talk. He has written, as a matter of fact, he's written something like 700 articles and 22 books, largely on diet and disease. He was a dentist who got really interested in diet and disease. The one thing I was struck about when I heard Sharaskin talk, he said, I have written 700 articles and 22 books, but he said those 700 articles drew no attention, but one book I wrote on vitamin C, which was the vitamin C connection, that one book he wrote, he said, called more attention and made more change in the community than all the hundreds of articles he wrote for physicians. So we're seeing, again, this is a time, I believe, this whole crisis is going to help the public think about what responsibility do I want to take for my health? Are there some simple, natural, harmless things I could do to boost my immunity, to eat better, to live a more healthy lifestyle? Sharaskin realized decades ago that he had more power going directly to the public. And I think each of you have power to take charge of your own health and also help your family and your loved ones take some responsibility and look into simple, natural, life-supporting things. Sharaskin, then we've got our new doctor, Paul Merrick, who's worked with sepsis, remarkable work with sepsis, a #1 cause of death in many hospitals, showed that intravenous vitamin C oftentimes saved these people. Just a remarkable story. You might look up the NPR discussion on that or the Smithsonian article on that. The last hero I'd like to mention, Dr. Russell Jaffe. Dr. Russell Jaffe is living today. He's actually my mentor. I've studied with him for 30 years. He knew Linus Pauling. He knew many of these researchers. He knew Irving Stone. He knows vitamin C. He's a biochemist as well as a physician, and it's from him that I learned so much about the value of ascorbate. And I really feel it's my obligation to share this with you. I have certainly seen a remarkable improvement in my own health, and I'm very indebted to all of these heroes who stood up in the face of criticism, in the face of naysayers. Now, what we're saying, everyone, it's an very interesting thing about this planet. It's a planet of free will. We've been giving our choice. We've been given free will. People can do as they want. I'm just suggesting, if you're interested in natural therapies, look into vitamin C. You can look at the links I've given you. Each of these people have written a great deal. Study it. Decide for yourself. Decide how you want to take care of yourself, especially today when we're facing this unusual crisis. And this unusual crisis is kind of a culmination of having to pay the piper. You know, part of it is having to pay the piper for using this concept of a pill for every ill. Most recently, for example, they have just reported that one of the drugs that's most damaging to bone, which is prednisone, these steroid drugs, is also makes you more vulnerable to COVID. And this is an article in Science News. Individuals taking class of steroid medications at high risk for COVID-19. It was just published a couple days ago. Again, a link. We've already seen other medications increase your risk for COVID, like certain of these blood pressure ACE inhibitor medications. Now we see the steroids. As we sort out this data over the coming years, I'm sure we're going to see many ways we've weakened ourselves that actually make us more vulnerable to these viruses. The bone health story with the steroids, I've spoken of many times. Roughly 20% of all the osteoporosis in this country is due to steroid use. And it's not to say that steroids have a life-saving effect. They do have a life-saving effect many times. However, one needs to be sure they really have to have them, and one needs to look for alternatives to solve that health problem. You know, to look to the cause of the problem, whether it's the asthma due to allergies, whether it's the pain and inflammation due to autoimmune disease. There are ways to treat autoimmune disease now that the functional medicine doctors are bringing to the public. Try to get to the root of the problem. So I thought that was really interesting, the link between steroid medications and COVID, and we know there's a strong link with bone health. And if you're on steroids, know that boosting your immunity is a really great idea. All the nutrients we're talking about will help, and get professional help from the functional medicine doctors who know how to deal with autoimmune disease and unwanted inflammation. So many of you have been asking questions about vitamin C and making comments. I've received hundreds of comments, and I promise soon we're going to shift topics, but I'm going to just answer a couple questions now, and I think tomorrow I'm going to pull up my computer and just kind of go through a few of the key questions that are asked over and over again. Let me emphasize that I'm a great vitamin C advocate because I've personally seen the benefits. But it's a planet of free will. If you want to look at the research, you decide for yourself. However, I will answer these questions. This was very interesting. One is a night nurse, and boy, my hats go off to all the nurses, all the doctors in the medical community who are out there working to help save other people's lives. I do think that hopefully one day soon we have an antibody test. We can test people and see, have you already had the virus? Are you already recovered? Can you work more freely with the public who might, without thinking you're going to expose them to the virus or to catch it yourself? Just back to Geraldine Pryor for a second. You know, she did mention that in her community there in Vancouver, this spiritual community she works with, that 10% of the people report they've already have diagnosed COVID from their doctors, and they're either recovering or have recovered. And that's going to be the fate for most of us. You know, keep strong, do the social distancing, but we'll get better. And it was really encouraging to see that such a large community of her, in her area, has already had been diagnosed with it. They've already gotten better. But back to the vitamin C question from the nurse. She says, I'm a night nurse. I take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C every night. So that's great. I think that's a good idea. This was Susan who wrote, I think it's a great idea, Susan, but I would take much more. I would take, in China, they're using 3,000 to 5,000. I definitely take much more. And you can always tell if you have too much because you're getting too much loose stool. But there's certainly no problem. It's extremely safe. I would take more vitamin C. I would take maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, cutting back only if I got too much loose stool. We don't cut back because of gas, because you can get gas when you take vitamin C because the bacteria starts to recalibrate. Some of the good bacteria grow, some of the bad die. So I don't worry about that. But loose stool can be a little bit annoying. Too loose stool, that is. Another comment is, several people ask, well, is it safe to do? And I would just reiterate, vitamin C is enormously safe. You can research it on the internet yourself. We have mentioned, you know, if you have a special health concern like oxalate kidney stones or you retain iron in the body, you might want to talk to your doctor about it. In fact, I've listed some of the, if you look on the internet, there's, and WebMD and that, there's very few counterindications of vitamin C. It's remarkably safe. So I personally feel comfortable and have for decades taking vitamin C, several thousand milligrams a day. Someone wanted to know where they can get the pH test kit. I forgot to take off my, to block the calls. Anyway, so the vitamin C test kit is at Alkaline for Life, alkalineforlife.com, and you can get it. So if you have questions about our protocol to boost immunity or questions about vitamin C, just feel free to send them. I have hundreds of questions already. I'm going to go over a few of them tomorrow, and then we'll start moving on to other topics that can help the body. It's been my pleasure talking with you. I hope you had a great day. I hope you get outside. It's a beautiful day here. I'm going out now. Take care.